Dennis Carl Wilson was born on December 4th, 1944, in Inglewood, California, and grew up in the working-class suburb of Hawthorne. Picture this: a modest house in a tight-knit neighborhood, filled with the sounds of music, but also the tension of a dysfunctional family. Dennis was the middle son, stuck between his older brother Brian, the musical genius behind the Beach Boys' iconic sound, and his younger brother Carl, the gentle soul with a golden voice. Being the middle kid is tough enough, but Dennis, he was the odd one out, the black sheep of the Wilson clan. His family even called him Dennis the Menace because, well, he was always stirring up trouble. Whether it was pulling pranks or pushing boundaries, Dennis had this spark of defiance that set him apart. Growing up in Hawthorne in the 1940s and 50s wasn't exactly glamorous. It was a blue-collar town, full of families grinding to make ends meet. The Wilsons weren't rich, but they had big dreams, especially when it came to music. Their mom, Audrey, was a pianist who filled the house with melodies, giving the boys an early love for harmony. Imagine little Dennis, Brian, and Carl gathered around the piano singing tunes like "Come Down from the Ivory Tower." Those moments were like a warm hug in a house that could feel pretty cold at times. Music was their escape, their glue, and for Dennis, it was a way to channel all that restless energy. Their father, Murray Wilson, was a former machinist who fancied himself a songwriter. But let's be real, he was a tyrant at home. Dennis himself said, "We had a shitty childhood. My dad was a tyrant. He used to wail on us, physically beat the crap out of us." That's not just tough love, that's straight up abuse. Murray ruled the household with an iron fist, and Dennis, being the rebellious one, bore the brunt of it. Audrey once admitted that Dennis had it the hardest, often facing severe spankings for stepping out of line. Can you imagine being a kid, full of energy and curiosity, and constantly being shut down with that kind of harshness? It's no wonder Dennis developed a screw authority attitude early on. But it wasn't all darkness. Audrey, bless her heart, was the counterbalance. She was the soft touch, the one who nurtured the boys' love for music. Her piano playing wasn't just background noise, it was a lifeline. For Dennis, those moments of singing with his brothers were probably some of the few times he felt truly free. It's like even in a house full of tension, music was this sacred space where he could be himself. And that's a big deal when you're growing up in a place where you're always on edge. So how does a kid like Dennis cope with a dad who's always on his case? He finds his own way. For Dennis, that meant escaping to the outdoors. While Brian was geeking out over the four freshmen's jazz harmonies, Dennis was out there living life on his own terms. Murray, maybe trying to buy some goodwill, got the boys go-karts, and Dennis, he was all about it. Picture him tearing through the streets of Hawthorne, wind in his hair, feeling like nothing could hold him back. But his real love? The ocean. Southern California in the 50s was the birthplace of surf culture, and Dennis was right there, riding the waves. He was the only true surfer in the Beach Boys, and that wasn't just a hobby, it was his identity. For a kid who felt trapped in a strict household, surfing must have been like therapy. Every wave was a chance to break free, to feel alive. And that love for the ocean didn't just stay with Dennis, it became the spark for the Beach Boys' early sound. Their first single, Surfin', released in 1961, was inspired by Dennis's stories of catching waves. He wasn't just a drummer, he was the guy who brought the whole surf vibe to the band. That's huge. Without Dennis's rebellious spirit and his connection to the beach, the Beach Boys might have been just another pop group. That rebellious streak, forged in a home where he was constantly at odds with his dad, didn't just make Dennis a free spirit, it set him on a complicated path. The same defiance that made him race go-karts and surf with abandon also made it hard for him to play by the rules. His struggles with authority didn't stop at home. They followed him into adulthood, into the band, and into his personal life. In 1961, and in a cramped garage in Hawthorne, Brian Wilson, his brother Carl, their cousin Mike Love, and buddy Al Jardine are messing around with harmonies, calling themselves the Pendletones. They're dreaming big, but they need a drummer. Enter Dennis Wilson, the 16-year-old middle brother who'd rather be out surfing or, as he famously put it, playing doctor with the girl next door than practicing boring drum scales. Can you blame him? The guy was all about living life to the fullest. Waves, girls, and good times were his thing. Dennis, then 16, was reluctantly recruited as drummer by his mother, Audrey, despite preferring surfing and chasing girls. At first, Dennis was like, nah, this isn't for me. But once he sat behind that drum kit, something clicked. He didn't have the polished technique of a studio pro, but what he lacked in finesse, he made up for with pure, unfiltered energy. That raw, pounding beat he brought gave the Pendletones, soon renamed the Beach Boys by their label, a sound that felt alive like the crash of a wave. It was the kind of energy you can't fake, and it set the stage for their meteoric rise. Fast forward to 1962, and the Beach Boys score a deal with Capitol Records. This is huge, like going from singing in your garage to being on the radio huge. Their surf rock anthems start dropping, and suddenly songs like Surfin' USA, Surfer Girl, and I Get Around are everywhere. By 1965, they're legit rivaling the Beatles for chart dominance. That's no small feat. And while Brian was the mastermind behind the melodies and harmonies, Dennis was the guy who gave the band its soul. His authentic surfer lifestyle wasn't just a gimmick, it was the real deal. He lived the beach life that Brian wrote about, and that authenticity resonated with fans across the country. Let's talk about Surfin', their first regional hit in 1961. That song didn't just come out of nowhere. Dennis was the one who pushed Brian to write it. He was out there riding waves every day, soaking up the Southern California surf culture, and he knew it was something special. He'd come home all salty and stoked, telling Brian, "You gotta write about this." And when Surfin' hit the radio, Dennis lost it. He later said he ran down the street screaming, "Listen, we're on the radio." Can you imagine that feeling? Your band's song, born from your own passion, blasting through car speakers? That's the kind of moment that changes everything. Dennis, this guy wasn't just a drummer. He was a straight-up rock star. Picture him up there, all tanned and athletic, with sun-bleached hair and a cheeky grin that could melt hearts. Teenage girls were obsessed. Like, we're talking screaming, chasing him down the street obsessed. Brian even admitted the girls would run right past us to get to him. Ouch. Talk about sibling jealousy. Dennis had this magnetic charm, this fun-loving rogue vibe that made him stand out, even in a band full of talent. On stage, Dennis was electric. His drumming might have been a bit rough around the edges. Fun fact, in the studio, pros like Hal Blaine often took over for the more complex tracks, but live, Dennis was untouchable. He'd pound those drums with this infectious energy, hyping up the crowd like nobody else. Fans didn't care if his beats weren't perfect. They were there for the vibe, and Dennis delivered every single time. He was the guy who made you feel like you were at the beach, even if you were stuck in a sweaty concert hall in the middle of nowhere. Back in the early 60s, surfing wasn't just a sport, it was a lifestyle, a symbol of freedom and rebellion. Dennis didn't just surf, he lived it. He was out there at dawn, catching waves at places like Manhattan Beach or Malibu, hanging with the local surf crowd. That authenticity gave the Beach Boys credibility. When they sang about sun, sand, and surf, you believed it because Dennis was living proof it was real. Brian Wilson, the band's genius composer, is pushing boundaries. And by 1966, he drops Pet Sounds, a game changer that trades sandy beaches for introspective orchestral vibes. While rumors swirled about band discord over this bold shift, Dennis was all in. He might have been the band's resident rebel, but he saw where Brian was going and backed him up, even if Carl was Brian's biggest cheerleader. That support shows Dennis wasn't just along for the ride, he was ready to grow with the band. But here's where it gets juicy. Dennis wasn't content just keeping the beat anymore. Underneath that wild heartthrob exterior was a sensitive soul itching to express itself. By 1968, he started flexing his creative muscles on the album Friends. This is where we first see Dennis the songwriter shine. He teamed up with poet Stephen Kalinich to write Little Bird and Be Still, two tracks that are like a warm hug compared to the band's upbeat surf anthems. Little Bird has this gentle, almost folk-like vibe with hints of Brian's melodic magic, while Be Still is a quiet, meditative moment that feels like Dennis baring his soul. Critics loved these songs for their delicacy, and fans started to see a new side of the guy they thought was all about surf and swagger. By 1969, with the album 2020, Dennis was hitting his stride. He wrote and produced Be With Me, a soulful ballad that's all heart, dripping with emotion. And then there's Never Learn Not to Love, a B-side single that's got a wild backstory. Fun fact, Dennis reworked it from a song called Cease to Exist by none other than Charles Manson. Yeah, that Manson. Dennis had a brief, weird connection with him in the late 60s, but he took Manson's creepy lyrics and turned them into something hauntingly beautiful. That's talent, taking something dark and making it resonate. But the real magic happened in 1970 with Sunflower, an album critics still rave about as a post-60s masterpiece. Dennis stole the show with Forever, a love song so heartfelt it feels like a warm embrace. With its lush harmonies and raw emotion, Brian himself called it a rock and roll prayer. That's high praise from the guy who wrote Pet Sounds. Dennis also brought the funky, upbeat slip-on through, which showed he could do more than just ballads. These tracks weren't just filler. They were proof Dennis was becoming a creative force, someone who could carry the band's legacy as Brian's output started to wane. As Brian's productions got more complex, he leaned heavily on session musicians like Hal Blaine, a legendary drummer who played on tons of 60s hits. That meant Dennis, the band's original drummer, was often sidelined in the studio. Dennis's pride took a hit, and you can bet it stung. He was a guy who thrived on raw energy, and being replaced by a polished pro didn't sit well. These tensions weren't just about drumming. As Dennis's songwriting grew, he wanted his voice heard, but not all his work made the cut. Take 4th of July, a protest song he wrote around 1971, or Carry Me Home, a gut-wrenching ballad. Both were meant for Surf's Up, but they got shelved. Some say the band thought they were too heavy, too far from their sunny image. Others point to internal politics, Brian's struggles, Mike's focus on commercial hits, and the general chaos of a band trying to stay relevant. Whatever the reason, those rejections hit Dennis hard. He was pouring his soul into these songs, and having them ignored must have felt like a slap in the face. Despite the setbacks, Dennis kept pushing. By 1972, on the album Carl and the Passions, So Tough, he delivered two absolute gems, Cuddle Up and Make It Good. These tracks are like a window into Dennis's heart. Cuddle Up is this lush orchestral ballad that wraps you in warmth, while Make It Good is raw and vulnerable, showcasing a depth you wouldn't expect from the guy once known as the band's party animal. These songs stood in stark contrast to the Beach Boys' classic hits, proving Dennis wasn't afraid to go deep, even if it meant straying from the band's surf pop roots. What's so special about these tracks is how they reveal Dennis's evolution. He wasn't just mimicking Brian's style anymore. He was carving his own path. His songs had this cinematic quality, blending rock, soul, and even a touch of gospel. And unlike the band's earlier carefree tunes, Dennis's work grappled with love, loss, and longing. It's like he was using music to process his own highs and lows, and that authenticity connected with fans who were craving something real. The Beach Boys were a family, and like any family, they had their share of drama. Creative differences, egos, and the weight of fame created a tense vibe in the studio. Dennis, with his big personality and growing ambition, was right in the middle of it. He wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, but he was still seen by some as the fun-loving drummer. That disconnect fueled his frustration, and it's no secret that his personal struggles, partying, relationships, and a restless spirit started to creep in. Dennis was married 5 times, and each relationship was as turbulent as a stormy sea. His impulsive, all-in nature meant he loved hard, but that passion often led to chaos. At just 20 years old in 1965, Dennis tied the knot with Carol Friedman. They adopted her son Scott, and in 1967 they welcomed a daughter, Jennifer. Sounds sweet, right? But their marriage was a battleground of constant fights, and by the end of '67, they were divorced. In 1970, Dennis married Barbara Charin, a teenage receptionist who caught his eye. They had a son, Michael, but Dennis's non-stop partying and rock star lifestyle tore them apart, leading to another divorce by 1974. Then came the saga with actress Karen Lamb, which was next-level intense. They got hitched in 1976, split up, tried again in 1978, and still couldn't make it work. Their fights were legendary. Think screaming matches and, Dennis allegedly setting fire to Karen's Ferrari in a fit of jealousy. That's not just drama. That's straight-up chaos. These stories paint a picture of a guy who loved with every fiber of his being, but couldn't quite find the stability to make it last. One of Dennis's most intriguing relationships was with Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac from 1979 to 1981. This was like a rock and roll power couple. Christine, known for her soulful voice and killer songwriting, fell hard for Dennis's charm. She even wrote songs inspired by him like Hold Me and Only Over You, which are pure emotion wrapped in melody. She called him a beautiful soul, and you can feel that in her music. But Dennis's struggles with addiction, booze, drugs, you name it, put a strain on their bond. By 1981, they called it quits, leaving behind a bittersweet chapter that showed Dennis could inspire art even in his darkest moments. And then there's the wildest twist. His 1982 marriage to Shawn Love, who was rumored to be Mike Love's daughter. Yeah, that Mike Love, his Beach Boys bandmate and cousin. Talk about family drama. They had a son, Gage, but the marriage was a mess, with a restraining order against Mike adding fuel to the fire. Dennis's love life wasn't just turbulent, it was a full-on soap opera, with each chapter more jaw-dropping than the last. Now let's talk about Dennis as a father. He had 4 kids, Scott, Jennifer, Michael, and Gage, and by all accounts he loved them fiercely. He'd take them to the beach, letting them ride the waves like he did, or bring them to the studio to see Dad in action. Those moments must have been magic, with Dennis's infectious energy making everything feel like an adventure. But here's the heartbreaking part. He wasn't always there when they needed him. His lifestyle, late nights, parties, and constant motion, meant he struggled to provide the stability kids crave. It's like he wanted to give them the world, but couldn't slow down long enough to build it. Being a rock star dad in the 60s and 70s wasn't easy. The Beach Boys were constantly touring or recording, and Dennis's personal demons didn't help. His kids got glimpses of his warmth and charisma, but they also felt the absence of a steady presence. It's a reminder that even the most vibrant souls can cast shadows, especially when they're caught up in a life moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Dennis's motto, as he wrote in album liner notes, was, "I live a fast life. It won't last forever, but the memories will." And man, did he live up to that. This guy didn't just spend money, he burned through it. Sports cars? Check. Wild parties? Oh yeah. A 52-foot sailboat named Harmony? You bet. While his brothers, Brian and Carl, were more cautious, Dennis was all about the thrill of the moment. He'd throw epic bashes, inviting everyone from fellow musicians to random beach bums, turning every night into a legend. But that lavish lifestyle came at a cost. By the late 70s, Dennis was financially strained, a stark contrast to the carefree image he projected. That sailboat, Harmony, was more than just a status symbol. It was a reflection of Dennis's soul. He loved the ocean, and being out on the water was where he felt free. But even that couldn't save him from the consequences of his choices. His spending habits, combined with his addictions, left him in a tough spot, relying on the band and friends to keep him afloat. It's a classic rock star story, but with Dennis, it feels personal, like watching a friend spiral and wishing you could pull them back. Dennis's escalating addiction to alcohol, cocaine, and heroin darkened his later years, threatening his role in the Beach Boys. By the late 1960s, his substance abuse strained band dynamics with his erratic behavior, missing cues, or slurring lyrics, frustrating his bandmates. In 1978, he was arrested in Arizona for sharing drugs and alcohol with a 16-year-old girl, incurring $100,000 in legal fees. That same year, his drunken antics, including streaking across stages, led the Beach Boys to temporarily fire him from touring. In 1980, he was too intoxicated to attend the band's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony, a low point that embarrassed his peers. The band issued ultimatums: get sober or leave. Dennis attempted rehab multiple times, but his resolve faltered. Financially ruined, he lost his yacht Harmony and Brothers Studios, becoming a transient figure along the L.A. coast. In 1983, tensions with Mike Love over Dennis's marriage to Sean Love led to mutual restraining orders, fracturing the band further. Despite these struggles, Dennis's 1977 solo album Pacific Ocean Blue was a triumph. Its soulful tracks like River Song and Farewell My Friend, revealing his emotional depth. Critics praised its haunting beauty, noting Dennis's potential to lead the Beach Boys' legacy, if not for Brian. His 1979 contributions to L.A., Light Album, Love Surrounds Me, and Baby Blue carried the same melancholy, but his deteriorating voice reflected years of abuse. Dennis was like a meteor, Carl Wilson said. He flashed so brightly before burning out. On December 28, 1983, Dennis Wilson's life ended tragically in Marina del Rey. After leaving a detox program on Christmas Day, he spent 3 days drinking heavily. That afternoon, on a friend's yacht, Emerald, Dennis impulsively dove into the 58-degree Fahrenheit water to retrieve items he'd thrown overboard years earlier, keepsakes from happier times. Despite his intoxication, he made several dives, joking about his finds. Around 4 p.m., he dove again and didn't resurface. His friends, including Bill Oster, alerted Harbor Patrol, and divers recovered his body at 5:45 p.m., 12 feet underwater. With a blood alcohol level of 0.26%, the coroner ruled his death an accidental drowning. Dennis was 39. The Beach Boys mourned deeply, stating, "His spirit will remain in our music." Mike Love added, "We'll miss him every day for the rest of our lives." Brian, devastated, was initially too grief-stricken to speak. Dennis's wish for a sea burial was honored, thanks to President Ronald Reagan, who granted rare civilian approval. On January 4, 1984, his ashes were scattered in the Pacific, a fitting return to his beloved ocean, though Carl and Brian questioned the decision. Al Jardine noted, "The Beach Boys' career is engulfed by Dennis's love of the ocean." In 1988, Dennis was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Beach Boys. His solo work, particularly Pacific Ocean Blue, reissued in 2008, gained renewed acclaim with songs like Forever, covered by artists like John Stamos. Dennis's authentic surfer spirit and soulful music continue to resonate, cementing his legacy as the heart of the Beach Boys' California dream. Dennis Wilson was a study in contrasts, a carefree surfer who battled inner demons, a harmony singer living in chaos. "I'm a wanderer, a dropout, a loser," he told a reporter in the late 1970s, "but I'm a good person, and I'll tell the truth." His generous, honest soul shone through despite his upheavals. His life was a pursuit of ecstatic moments, from surfing waves to crafting songs, but his reluctance to face consequences led to his downfall. His bandmate Carl captured it best. Dennis was like a meteor flashing brightly before burning out too soon. Dennis's story is a poignant reminder of the fragility of brilliance, leaving a legacy that endures through the Beach Boys' timeless hits and his soulful solo work. His music, infused with love, loneliness, and the sea, continues to touch hearts, evoking the endless summer of the 1960s. That's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, drop us a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss our new content. Thanks for watching.